Looping and mind gaming is the art form of DBD, right? And that is a relationship between killer and survivor, right? To me, I look at it as like chess. Like each move sets up the next move, right? As you can see, I'm playing against this trickster, and this is not a baby killer. I get a lot of those because this trickster thought I was gonna actually take the window, and he clearly know how to mind game. It's just he also going against an experienced survivor himself, so I also know how to mind game as well. Now, the guy who just threw down that God Pallet. Now, here's my thing about God Pallets, and I want to kind of make this clear for everyone that plays this game and they act as if these sacred pallets aren't supposed to be used at some point in time, because it's almost like you're not supposed to ever use God Pallet. Here's my thing about Shack Pallet or whatever, right? Or these strong loop pallets or things like that. I look at it like this: you want to be able to get the most amount of usage out of those pallets as much as possible. What I mean by that is try to loop as much as you can, as much as possible. What I mean by that is you can't be afraid to learn how to loop, and I'm gonna get into that later about being afraid and learning how to mind game with confidence. So before I throw down any pallet, I try to read the killer that I'm going. First, I want to look at the killer I'm going against, like what kind of killer, what type of abilities killer have. Like the trickster is a range killer, just like the hunter is, just like Nemesis, right? Even though they have their powers a little bit differently, but these are the killers that can hit you from afar, right? And they can also basically attack you if they want to, or M1 you if you are on PC. The reason why I'm saying these things is because it's not that I have an issue with Shack Pallet ever being used. I just look at it as at least loop it around to where you at least get the entity blocking the window, right? But then that comes with you understanding how to loop. But what is looping? Looping is like, something that starts and then it ends in the exact same spot that it started. It's a loop, right? It's like a circle, right? So when I'm looping, I'm usually going around this pallet, and I'm on console, so I'm using my right stick to pan left or right as I'm running around in circles. Now, for those who are ignorant, no disrespect to their mother, but for those who are ignorant and don't understand that looping is a skill, it is, because it's mind gaming. I mean, a lot of people don't know how to hug their loops tightly, and there's times where you're gonna mess up. Like, no one's perfect. Anytime survivors, especially survivors, post these videos, it's like people can't wait for them to see like one little thing, right? Even though if you're really good, you can actually, correct it, right? You can actually pick it up and actually say, okay, well, I did this, or, let me try this, let me try that. It's thinking on the go, thinking on the fly. And that's the thing about mind gaming. See, you're playing the other person. Even I could be going against 1,000 bubbas, like in a time of me playing Dead by Daylight. But it's almost like every bubba plays differently. I mean, most of them are gonna try to use their power, which I love those, by the way, because for those who know how to loop, that's not a problem. We know how to hug the walls, we know how to hug around pallets. But for those, and there are many who cannot loop, I ain't talking about you. I see a lot of people, even people with thousands of hours into this game, leave the loop. What I mean by leaving the loop, I mean, you don't try to go around in the circle or around that area to mind game around the pallet. You see a lot of, like, the nurse is really hard to do it against because the nurse can just blink around the pallet. I mean, I caught her with a pallet stun and I got lucky, right? Like, I got really lucky right there because, I mean, I ain't gonna say it's pure luck because also, again, I know how to mind game and read, but at the same time, like, most of the time I don't catch nurses with pallet stuns because they're unpredictable, right? They can blink through walls and all this other good stuff, right? Not like you going against, I don't know, a huntress where, the thing with the huntress is that I know a lot of them play the same because they are ranged attack killers, but also know that a lot of the times the huntress expect people to throw down the pallet, so they usually wind up right before you about to throw down the pallet. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, you're going against a lot of these baby huntresses because, all they do is just wind up around the pallet, but y'all got to understand, there are a lot of survivors who cannot loop in this game. There are a lot of survivors that these huntresses and these doctors and these Myers, they all go against these survivors that cannot loop. And I don't care how many hours you have into this game, looping is not something that they taught you the first day you played, right? I would suggest that you get into a Kill Your Friends or a KIF lobby and you practice how to mind game. I mean, I've been doing that and I've gotten better at it. I've gotten better at reading. I've gotten better at looking behind me. I've gotten better at penning the right stick. You have to get confident and not be afraid to learn how to loop. You have to understand when a killer is gonna respect the pallet, right? So, well, what is respecting? What is that? I'm gonna tell you what not respecting is. If I'm looping around, let's say I'm looping around this pallet, and this nurse just kept going around and around. If I sense that she did not respect the pallet, and she can be liable for a pallet stun. But if you respect, you know, there's times where you think you're about to catch a killer with a pallet stun because you kept going over and over around the loop, and then they end up like, you know, jumping back or something, and then you end up wasting that pallet, which is still possibly not a waste if the killer does not break the pallet. You know what I mean? Like if the killer doesn't kick the pallet and break it, you can still mind game around that. You can fake like you're about to loop and jump over that pallet. You know what I mean? But a lot of people, what they do, and there are a lot of new survivors, right? There are not a loser, and I will tell you this. They do say, and I don't play killer like that. I feel like early on, if I really got into killer, I would have been a better survivor early on, because I would know exactly how the killer moves. But it is true though. Like the more you know how a survivor moves and you play killer, you can see both sides. It's just, my thing is, I play so much survivor with like basically 3,000 hours into this game as mostly survivor, that I've seen all the killers. I know exactly how most of them play. I know when to, but here's the thing. A lot of the times we unnecessarily go down by a killer's hands because we are very greedy. Look how I'm greeding this pallet. You see how I'm greeding this pallet? Now this is my opinion. You do not have to greed. You don't have to greed. Like people have this mind. People think it's skill because you greed. That's or if you don't use Shack Pallet at all. To me, that's just like, I don't usually use Shack Pallet like that. Like, I mean, again, it's fair game to me if you at least looped it around, and let's say you even got hit through the window. Even if you didn't get hit through the window, but let's just say for the sake of it, you got hit through the window and you know you're about to go down. You know, fast vaulted through the window so much so that the entity had to step in and say, hey, you doing way too much. You dropping off this killer. We gotta intervene. Because in my opinion, Bloodlust and Entity, that's almost like working at the sixth perk for killers. Okay, you get the Entity helping you out, and you also got Bloodlust. And you know what I mean? To me, those are almost like perks, because those are abilities that's to your advantage. But anyway, I don't have an issue with that if someone used Shack Pallet, in my opinion. And even if it's like early on into the game. As long as survivors are doing the generators, it really does not matter. You listen. I feel like a lot of people really don't get, like, I don't care how good you are as a survivor in looping and chase and mind gaming, none of that means anything if you got survivors now knocking out gens. I dropped off a killer, and of course I got a lot of hate for it, because apparently I was bullying the killer because I was just running from him doing my job. I guess I'm bullying this Bubba too. Like, but killers can hit you on hook repeatedly just because you took them on a long wild goose chase. They can do that all day. But when it comes to you just doing your job as survivor, oh, you're a bully, or somehow you're automatically going against baby killer, even though there's no way to prove what skill this person is or not. Like, you don't know it doesn't even show it in the game. You can't, I'm not trying to get off on a rant, but I need people to understand how silly that sounds when they assume that you're going against weak killers. But I guarantee if that killer was busting my ass, excuse my language, they wouldn't be questioning that killer's MMR or anything like that. But anyway, my whole point is that you have to be able to read and understand the situation. That if you got survivors that are knocking out gens, I don't care what pallet you use, so long as you can occupy that killer's time. It's about the point of chase and loop, ladies and gentlemen, it's about wasting the killer's time while survivors are knocking out gens, because you're not going too far regardless. The exit gates have to be powered, all right? And they don't get powered until someone's opening all and completing all the gens. But listen, if you guys like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and please leave something down in the comments and let me know how you felt about this video. Peace.